Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics. This beautiful quilt behind me called Silent Night. Launched this as a block of the month here a few weeks back. A lot of people are like, tell me now, don't make me wait until the fall to figure out, can I do this project? How does it go together? So we're filming those supporting videos that I talked about in the overview video right now, giving you early access to watch the process and understand how it goes together. No mysteries here. I want to take you through the different steps, but we'll kind of break this up in chapters. This is a longer video, kind of in different sections. So what we'll be doing is just talk about, all this applique, prefused laser cut applique. Okay, that's awesome. We love skipping tracing. We love skipping, cutting that all out. But once we get our kit, now what do? We've got these papers, these diagrams, these pieces. Now what? So I'll be talking you through that. It's a really fun process. I'll give you some pointers along the way as they come to my mind, help you be successful. These layout diagrams are gold. Oh my gosh, they're your friends. And we'll be going over that in detail, talking about how do you read this thing? What are all these numbers and lines and what is all that meaning? And they're all benefits to you. And that's why I'll be breaking that down. I'll be showing you how we can actually skip any hand embroidery on this by doing a little bit of stitching on our sewing machine instead of by hand. Of course, you always have the option of stitching the lines in the windows. The technical term, as I've learned recently, are mullions in the windows. You can always do that with a simple backstitch. But I'm going to go through today how we can set our machine to a satin stitch and sew all of those. And that's exactly what we did for all of our windows. We also did it for our beautiful Holy Star, even the line for our beautiful bell, the line in our door, kind of to separate our different two doors. Awesome. We actually did 0 hand embroidery on this project. So if you're like, oh, woohoo, great, I'll be talking you through that. Once we talk about using these items and get them on the background, of course, you'd just be stitching those down. But the other thing I'll be going through in this video is actually how to make the piece blocks that are in the 4 corners. I've got some pointers for you there. Definitely something that is my go-to now to make perfect flying geese blocks every time with minimal waste and the most efficiency and speed. So I love that because there's so many other quilts I want to make. So if you're just now seeing this, there may be spots available in our block of the month. And if you're already in our program, give your good quilting friends a nudge and say, look, there is no other quilt. No one else has this. Shabby Fabrics is exclusive, not on the pattern, which was by Deb Grogan, but on this coloring, which is one that I did, which is a blend of the original fabrics that Silent Night was made in, which is the Poinsettia Plaza. But I've incorporated Stof Christmas, which we introduced actually last year. This was easily, hands down, our customers' favorite Christmas collection of all time. You're seeing this year's Stof Christmas, amazing fabrics. There's a level of elegance and timelessness that I've really never seen in another Christmas collection. They're just the depth of color. They each have these beautiful metallic accents. And again, it's just timeless. So this is what you're seeing here. This is Poinsettia Plaza. We have a special printing here of the backing of this. This is our backing choice. So if you didn't get that, pick it up right now. We can't get it again once it sells out. But all of this amazing, really magical fabric, this beautiful blend of Stof Christmas and then Poinsettia Plaza is what you're seeing. So we're going to kick this off, get something to drink, a snack, maybe take a break. We're going to be here for a while because I don't want to leave any stone unturned. These are the notions, by the way, that we use to put the project together. Maybe as I'm using them, you see a tool that you really want to add to your sewing room. Maybe just jot down a note that you're like, yep, I definitely need to pick that up. So let's start off with what you can expect. What you're going to get each month will be a portion of that quilt course. And we always like to give you layout diagrams. That is really kind of a roadmap to success every time you get them. Because a lot of applique patterns on the market today, not ours at Shabby, because we make sure we always include them, but a lot of those just give you a reverse for fusible applique, and they're maybe not even in the actual arrangement. They're just kind of scattered about. And somehow magically, once you get all your pieces traced and cut, you're supposed to look at a picture and get a perfect layout. It never happens, right? It's in the ballpark, but you don't have really even that chance, that roadmap to be able to try to achieve really amazing alignment. That's what a layout diagram does for you. And that's why each month you will get one, and sometimes it'll be multiple sheets. So when you open up your first kit, or all of the kits you're going to get throughout the program, you'll have multiple sheets. We always give you the bullseye so you can line up those pages exactly, and you want to take care to do that. You don't want to have any kind of a wonkiness in that. It needs to be as aligned as possible. If you have a light box, use it to your benefit. You will want a light box. So I'm going to turn that on. It might be a little bit bright for the overhead, so I might turn it down just a touch. But that immediately aids me in getting that perfect alignment. Grab some Scotch tape, and we'll start to line up our sight picture here. The light box that I have right here, there was a lot of years, I'll tell you, especially when the kids were little, I just simply couldn't afford all the expensive light boxes and the things that were out there. I would tape it up to my patio door, kind of the sliding glass door. Well, that was great on a sunny day, but when I would craft at night when the kids were sleeping, I had no light. So I quickly realized I can't always rely on sunshine to get done when illumination. So this is the Wafer 3 by Daylight. They actually make 3 sizes, the 1, 2, and 3, 3 being the largest. The reason the 3 is so phenomenal for this is you can see the sections of this quilt are very large. This is one continuous section. Now, as we'll see here shortly, we're not going to just do this in one big alignment. That's not even practical to put the pieces together. We will create the pieces in sections and then bring them onto the background as a full sight picture. But having the larger light box just gives us a longer run at it before we kind of have to shift to the next section. You get that. So once you have this taped together, I'll turn that light off just so it's easier for you to see. Now let's just look at that. Let's just break that down. So as you can see, you've got numbers, you have solid lines, you have dashed lines. If this is your first block of the month, this will be new to you for how to use our diagrams. And this is how we set up all of our layout diagrams. As you look at this, you can see that things are in different sections and with different numbers. So looking at this particular one, we see there's a number 1, and there's a number 2, and a number 3, and a 4, and a 5, and so on and so forth. That is the layering sequence that we chose to put the project together, meaning piece number 1, of course, here would be our tree. We have to figure out, okay, where does it fit into the sight picture? So I just kind of keep turning it until it fits exactly into the shape that I have. I'm like, nope, that's not quite it. Oh, there it is. You get the idea. That's piece number 1. Piece number 2 would go down, and piece 3, and piece 4, and piece 5, and so on and so forth. Now, as I said, we're not going to try to build this whole sight picture in one fell swoop. We're going to work in sections. So what does that mean? When you get your pieces in each kit, they have prefuse laser cut applique. This is a fusible webbing on the back. To release that, the simplest way is to give a good press. Give it a very good press. And you see how that released the paper. And now you'll just start to peel that away. And you'll do this with all of your pieces. And look at that shine. I love that our heat presses give you a professional press, a very clean transfer, that now the fusible, the glue portion is fully on the back of that fabric and no longer on the paper. So looking at our diagram, we already established that piece 1 goes first and 2 goes second. That makes sense. Notice we also have solid lines and dashed lines. The dashed lines are just letting you know that the piece that is dashed lies behind. So let's look here back at our shape here of our tree. And we can see that this part of the house, right, that tree is behind this side of the house. That's why on the diagram here, we have a dashed line on that part of the tree. It's just helping you understand that visual perspective of, all right, this piece will be covered up. So when you get ready to put that piece on, you're like, yes, this should be covering this up. It's just helping you confirm that you're in the right location. So as I look at this, and we're just kind of build this site picture just right here. I'm not going to work on that part of the house. Same process. I'm going to start with piece 1 and 2. I might as well build this kind of section together. It's okay that I'm going to build this as a unit and put that off to the side. The main thing, you could start here if you wanted to. You could put piece number 15 down, 16 and 17, and iron those together and put it to the side. You could do the same here. The point is, when you work in a section, you're always going to start with the lowest number of that section. So let's just start with this. I'm going to actually start with my smaller Applique mat. I have both sizes. I like to use the size I need for the job I'm doing in that moment. If you love applique, just get both of those sizes. I promise you're going to use them probably just as much. It's easier to use a smaller mat than a larger one when you're working in a smaller section. Now, when I would get ready to lay out the bulk of this, I would absolutely be transferring to the larger one. Heat. Let's talk about the heat on your iron. You should be having that at a medium heat. We cannot iron on our light box. So it's going to be important that you have either a wool pressing mat or an ironing board immediately adjacent to your light box so you can make a lateral transfer, right or left, depending on if you're right or left-handed, because you're going to need to do that. So let's look at, we have our light box, our layout diagram, that this is the Applique mat. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is as soon as you put this down, it starts to obstruct your view just a little bit. For that reason, a lot of times when I get ready to do applique, I get my camera, boom, take a photo of that. Now I see the diagram and I can prop it up. So as I'm laying pieces down, I'm not having to peek behind to say, where was that piece 3? Where was that piece 4? So that's just something I've learned along the way because I've done a lot of that lifting and a lot of that peeking. So let's look at what we have. Sometimes it's a really nice idea to really kind of have your arrangement almost set up and ready to go. So it's more of a matter of just moving into position. Okay, we know that's going to be there. That's going to be a section. Now let's look at this right here. Let's look at our pieces. And I think that's that tree right there. So we know our trunk needs to go down. And then it'll be followed by this piece and followed by our snow, right? And that's going to all, of course, there's no reason I can't fuse all of that together. No reason I can't do that. I could do this separately from the tree, but why not fuse them all together at the same time? We're going to do that. Let me just put this off to the side. Let's get our light box turned back on. If you probably did the paint by numbers like I did when I was a kid. Same idea, right? This is telling you exactly where to put each piece. So our sequence, light box, layout diagram, Applique, medium heat on the iron, wool pressing mat or ironing board to the side. That's your setup. Piece 1 is going down, and you're just fitting your shape in this footprint. See how right there I can see the line? I'm just going to scoot that. There's a tackiness to these mats, so you can press down, and it helps things stay in position. Here comes the trunk of the whatever tree this is, whatever we want to decide this is. I could just iron those elements down now, but I'm going to keep going. Why not keep going? I can just see the outline of that. Scoot that over just a touch. You'll, of course, have a sight picture. You'll have a photo of that. It's always great to confirm, is this what I'm seeing? Did I miss? Yep. And once you confirm, scoot that over just a touch. Now, I'm going to lift this up, being very careful not to bump anything. Straight down. Hold it straight down. No lateral movement. That's when things start to go a little crazy. You could move the shapes, right? You could distort the shapes. If you don't have a super clean iron on the bottom, we do have an iron cleaner. Go ahead and get that iron beautifully cleaned. We have a lot of the white glitter fabric in this one. And of course, you want to keep your fabric perfectly clean. We also have the June Tailor. It's like a pressing cloth. It's nice and thin. Sometimes if I'm worried about my iron, maybe drawing something, spitting something, we have a lot of iron where I live. And I'm always worried, like somehow there's a component. Sometimes I will cover that with the June Tailor pressing cloth, just if it's like a white and I'm worried about any amount of residue coming out and maybe leaving a little bit of a hint of maybe just a touch of that rust. So just something to think about. All right. We're going to let that cool down for just a bit. Let's look at the next part of our, let's work in here. So again, now that we're focused on this, you can see how the house is kind of in two separate sections. Piece 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. You could do that section and then do this section and bring them together. The one thing I want to point out to you, and I talked about the mullions in the windows, is right here. If you think about it ahead of time, you always want to draw lines of embroidery or stitching in advance, if possible, versus later on having to go, ooh, I just put all of these layers together and now I can't see through to draw the lines. And now you're trying to measure or you're kind of winging it. So with that in mind, with the shapes that we have here, I do want to draw that. Now keep in mind that we will absolutely be ironing this down. So we don't have the option of using a friction pen. We need to switch to a micron pen, a permanent marker. So for this reason, I'm going to put my window in the shape, the outline, grab a straight edge, any ruler, or just a straight edge, however you want to do it. And I am going to draw in those mullions, and we will later stitch those on the sewing machine together. I want to show you that. If you're uncomfortable with that, maybe you're sewing with a featherweight and you don't have a zigzag feature because it sews just straight forward and back. You can absolutely do this with a back stitch and get this accomplished. Either way, drawing these in advance is extremely helpful. So I'm going to get that right in its footprint. Get this drawn in. Okay, so that part is done. No amount of heat is going to take that away. So that's just perfectly ready for, you're thinking about downstream. What can I do now that's going to help ensure my success later? That's always something we want to think about. So again, like, okay, I see this piece is coming up. That's going to be 3. I have the outline of my window is 4 and 5. I can see that's going to happen. Let's look at that piece 6. And look at this beautiful, hopefully you can see this from the overhead. This is a mode of grunge that has a glitter embedded in it. No amount of rubbing takes the glitter off. I think that is so cool. I have tried to get the glitter off and I've never been able to. So somehow Moda has embedded that. And it's just so beautiful. It looks like the shimmer of the snow I see in North Idaho, especially like January. Somehow it's just glittery in January because it's probably so cold. So you get the idea. So I'm just going to build this section, iron that together. I'm going to do the same thing with this. I'm going to leave the smoke off because notice the smoke doesn't tuck underneath. There's no point in me putting that piece down. That will happen later during final assembly. This has certainly cooled down. As I peel this off, all of this is now in one unit. That's what I talk about when I say pre-assembled units and bring them onto the background as assembled units. This is what I'm talking about. And the most incredible thing, this mat has 0 residue. We have used this mat now for 5 years. Same mat, same video every time. We don't switch this out. You just can't hurt this thing. It continues to deliver. So when you do invest in the Applique mats, this is truly a one-time purchase, and you're going to have so many opportunities to use that. So I'm going to go ahead, put this section together. I'll put this section together. I might even put this together. Get those units together so then we can talk about bringing on our pieced background. What do these other lines mean? How do we use them? And we'll go ahead and assemble a portion of the side border here of this quilt. So I'll just continue to build my picture. It's my kind of quilt by numbers here. So now that I have the different sections assembled, see how that happened? And they're not in any specific arrangement. I'm just kind of working my way across the mat. Now, once again, we can peel them off, and there's very little contact with the roof in the house, and that's okay if there's just a little bit of contact. They'll be ironed together again. This portion, that portion, it's so fun to take off the different sections. And now they're ready to go. Our wool, our applique pressing mats are really done at this point. You want to make sure you're taking good care of them. They do such an important job for us. I have noticed on ones that I didn't roll up and I kind of left them out, just the dust in a room over time can kind of settle into this grid. It's worth wrapping them up, and they want to come undone, right? They don't come with anything that kind of holds them in this shape. These are the slap and wrap peels from the Gypsy Quilter. They work great for things like this. Maybe you work with stabilizer that, again, just kind of wants to unroll on you. Whatever that is that you're trying to keep organized in your sewing room, go ahead and just grab a package of those. They're fantastic. And I will be ending up using, I would potentially, if I was going to build more of this side picture all at the same time, which you could do, you could certainly be using the larger one. Again, an option for you. So we didn't build this portion. I would, of course, do that in advance, but let's just pretend that we did. Now what? So as you can see, we have a black with a snowflake and this beautiful cream snowflake, and those are pieced together. So you want to make sure you're getting some good clean cuts. Of course, that fresh blade and the rotary cutter, can't emphasize that enough. We've sewn this together and we've just pressed the seam open. You can, of course, make that. You have enough fabric to just from width to width sew them together. But I have cut this to the length that I need at this point. Or you could leave yours longer, do your applique, and then trim that up. That's just an option. But let's turn that over and let's look at our, look at this line right now. This line is letting you know that is the seam of the black and the cream. It helps you get aligned. Notice this says seam allowance, seam allowance. So as I lay out my pieced background, and again, let's just turn our light box on to help us get aligned. That's helping us to know where we should be, helping us to confirm, yes, this is the right location. Move that down. And it should really fit the footprint. I left my background just a little bit longer because when you sew something together and you do the applique, it can kind of draw everything up. So there's sometimes logic to leaving your piece just a little bit longer. Knowing you've left it longer, you do your applique, and then you're trimming that up to be the exact length that it needs to be. Now that I have this, I can see, and if I had my light box on full bright, I can actually see where these shapes go down. Now it's important for us to realize, all right, we've got these different sections. What does need to go down first? Remember, our lowest number was our tree in this section. So I can see that in here. And we're going to get that in position. I'm going to turn up my light box just a bit so I can see that a little bit better. You can always do kind of the peak. Oh, I was way low here. There we go. I was way too high, I should say. So I can see the bottom. Look for any clues you need. Now we know that our house portion over here was next. See how I can see the bottom easily? Line up with that. And I can faintly see it here. Our house. Can see the bottom of that. There's the top of the chimney. There's that smoke that I didn't put down before. Let me see if I can find that somewhere on my table. There it is. That's up in the sky, of course, coming out of our chimney. Boy, we have a lot of fires at my house during the winter time. It is cold in North Idaho. Wood is plentiful. So we're having fires in the fireplace. That's what my house looks like in the winter time. I'm always cold. All right, this tree, I now remember that was next. It's so fun once you've built your shapes and now you get to build your site picture and iron everything down. Now, I don't have anything in front of me to refer to, but you will. You're going to look at your picture and say, does this look like that? And if you can say a solid yes to that, now just like we talked about before, and I might just fold this out of our way, we need to have that wool pressing mat or ironing board immediately handy. Gently move over. And you're just going to start pressing things down. If that's too much to put down, maybe you want to just stop at the houses and then go back and add the trees. If you're worried about this, maybe you have a smaller wool pressing mat like I do. I would pick a larger area to press this down. I either have 2 wool pressing mats butted up to each other or be on a full ironing board or do it in sections. I've done it both ways, but whatever you do, you just don't want anything to shift. If you can do it in one fell swoop, awesome. If you need to do it in sections, awesome. I don't think anything shifted, so I'm going to keep going. Once you have all of your shapes down, before you would start sewing those mullions in the windows, or if you're going to be doing hand embroidery, if you're more comfortable with that, make sure you're stitching your shapes down to the background. I always like to secure this. This is Heat and Bond Light, I believe. Might be another brand, but it's that same idea that it's temporary. This is not a permanent bond meant to go through washing machine. This is to hold it down for you to be able to get to machine applique the shapes down. That is so beautiful. You can see the combination of this light box, the layout diagram, and the applique mat is a combination like no other. This bringing pieces onto the background one by one, those days are over. We don't have to do that anymore. A lot more fun and a lot more beautiful, and it's exactly what we're hoping for. Thread. This is obviously the time that we would do that stitching. This is where the thread set comes into play. Of course, we're using our beautiful red on the red. Very obvious, right? Well, one thing that I wanted to point out, we're going to do some close-ups. We don't get really fancy with our stitching when we do our machine applique. The design is spectacular. We don't really want the machine applique to take a big role. It's more to just get those shapes down to the background permanently. So as we kind of zoom in, let's look at our tree here. We just use the coordinating thread and sew right along just inside the edge. And that's what we do really with every shape. Of course, you could do whatever you want. One thing I want to mention is this beautiful gold metallic thread. We couldn't resist using that. Of course, it adds the element of magic. As I said, all the Stof Christmas have metallic. So it was the perfect combination, perfect addition, I would say, to an already amazing quilt. So what you're seeing on my machine is actually called a thread director because I've had so many problems with thread breakage with metallic thread. There's a combination of the thread director along with the Schmetz metallic needles that is the perfect combination that increases the likelihood of you just having a lot of fun and reducing the breakage when you're using metallic thread. And if you've got that heavy foot that sews really fast, you need to slow down. Draw that dial back to, like on the Bernina here, they've got the plus and the minus. Move that more toward the minus and slow down. The thread director helps that thread come off at the proper angle instead of twisting as it's coming off with a horizontal spool pin, right? Because if this thread was here, it's going to twist as it comes off. You've already created a torque or a tension. Here with the thread director, that can work with any machine. You don't have to have a fancy Bernina to do this. This is the spool pin that comes with a Bernina. If you have a machine at home, maybe that has a spool pin holder that you put in on the top of the machine, that's where you would insert this. Put this on, and the thread comes off like a ribbon. It comes off beautifully in combination with a Schmetz metallic needle, so that when you're sewing with that, you're going to be so much more likely to have beautiful results without the breakage. So I definitely wanted to mention that. The next thing we're going to actually do is I talked about the option of doing all of what I historically would have done by hand with hand embroidery, except we're going to be using a satin stitch. That is what we did with all of the mullions in the windows. We did that for the door, and as I said, for the Holy Star, and even that kind of right here that holds our beautiful bell. So we'll be heading over to the sewing machine. You're going to want to get some scrap fabric. You're going to want to play around with the width of your stitch, the length of the stitch. Make sure you're happy with that and practice with that before you're going to want to start stitching on your final project. So I'm going to head over there. I've done a little bit of my own practicing, figuring out the width I like, the density I like. That's all set up. So let's go head over there, and then we'll get that stitched down. After that's done, I'm going to clear off the table, really, and we're going to move on to these patchwork blocks, because this technique that I've showed you is the same for all of the sides of the quilt, of course, the big center block as well, and this. So really the next step is going to be doing those patchwork blocks in the corners, and then of course you're going to be sewing your whole quilt together once you get that final shipment. So I'll meet you over at the sewing machine, and let's sew those mullions into the windows. So I'm going to start just ahead, just a little bit further down from where the very top. That allows me to start back stitch to that location. Just helps have a nice clean start. And I'm not clipping my thread at the very end. It's going to be kind of buried in here. So I'm going to start there. There we go. We can see how a nice mullion here. Again, I'll start just a little bit from the top, kind of back into it. Here we go. And one more on the other side. And just like that, we have the mullions on our window. I love that. Trying to get that so straight with a back stitch, as careful as I am, as slow as I am, it's never quite as straight is when I sew with that sewing machine. Get comfortable with the Satin Stitch sewing machine. Or if you're like, I love doing hand embroidery and I'm really good at rack stitch, maybe that's your option that you prefer. So you'll, of course, prepare all of your blocks that way. We talked about this, same process. Now let's move on to our patchwork that's inner four corners. I definitely want to touch on that. Some cool products on the market helping us to just achieve almost near perfection results. I don't think there's any perfect quilt blocks, but my goal is always to make one, but I try to get as close as I can. Your instructions, of course, will be guiding you through the process. We're going to take a technique of how we make the flying geese portion of our block using the Creative Grid Flying Geese tool. I love this tool. So let's just set the other elements of the block aside for now, which is that center square right here and our four corners. Let's just focus on the flying geese. So the ultimate flying geese, which I'm a complete convert. I will tell you for 20 years, maybe 25 years, I made flying geese the traditional way. And that is frankly until I saw this amazing ruler. What this does is makes 4 flying geese with maximum accuracy and minimal waste and speed. Incredible. This will be a tool you will reach for well beyond this project. So if you do any quilts that have flying geese blocks, this is a tool that I would absolutely add to the sewing room. So let's look at the left side. Notice these are all the different finished sizes of flying geese units that you can make with this tool. The smallest is a 1/2 inch by 1 inch. So if you love miniature quilting, this is for you. All the way up to a 4 by 8. Now what we'll be doing today is actually the 3 by 6 flying geese units. And so that's going to be letter F. Just keep that in mind. That's going to come into play a little bit later on. We know we're going to do 3 by 6 inch finished units. They'll be 3.5 by 6.5 before they're sewn into the project. This is telling us that we need to cut 1 square 7 3/4 and 4 of those smaller squares at 4 1/4. And they're giving you a diagram here to kind of understand if you cut this, 4 of that, you're going to get 4 of this. So when you look at a flying geese block, this bigger portion of the flying geese unit is the section that's cut to the big size. And it's these that we historically would have just cut squares and drawn the line, sew and flip, trim the excess the way we traditionally learned to make these. These are the ones that you're cutting 4 of those. So that's what I have here. 1 7 3/4, 4 4 1/4. Your first step is with your 4 that are cut to 4 1/4 is you're just either going to draw the line diagonal to diagonal, or my favorite technique, another amazing flying or Creative Grid tool that again just makes our sewing so accurate, is I'm going to lay this on the diagonal of my square and I'm going to draw on either side of this. I am way, way more accurate trying to sew on a line versus find a 1/4 inch away from a line. So I love this technique of using this tool and just simply drawing on either side of that. And you'll do that with all 4 of your sections of your flying geese unit. Now on the right side here, we will place 2 of these in opposite corners. And those lines, notice they line right up, right? Because we were very accurate. This tool is extremely accurate. Get out our patchwork pins. Now, I would be sewing with we pieced our project with the gray that's inside the Aurifil Carrera set. This is a white, gray, and black spool. You don't need anything else to piece a quilt. You never need anything else. Applique is a totally different story. This is patchwork now. So we just use that whenever we're doing a project. We grab for white, gray, or black. That's all you'll ever need. So be sure to grab that. If you don't have a favorite thread, if maybe you're new at quilting, That is a wonderful brand of thread. Now, some people, this is optional, where these fabrics intersect, some people like to cut that. They feel like it creates bulk right there later on. You could absolutely do that. If you're inclined, you don't like that there, you could certainly cut that or leave that. I'll just do this with it on so you're seeing what that will produce if you don't trim the center. I've done both and had equal success. So I don't think it's imperative, but it's good for you to know how to do that. Now, what I'm going to do, because we were set up for zigzag, I'm going to change my presser foot and, of course, change to a needle that is appropriate for doing patchwork. So as soon as I come back, I will have that set up and we'll get our flying geese blocks sewn together. Okay, so now I have the right items on my sewing machine, the correct throat plate, the correct foot. I have my gray Carrera thread set. My dual feed is engaged. I'm sewing on that Bernina 770 normal stitch length. I had my tension actually dialed back a little bit looser as well for that satin stitch. I'd also loosen perhaps a little bit of the tension for the metallic. Again, something you always want to play around with. But I'm back to normal now, and my job is to sew as best I can on these lines. And we'll get started. All right, so remember we've been doing fusible, so let's bring that heat all the way up to maximum now that we're working on patchwork. I always have to remember when I'm doing a combination of patchwork and applique to bring the heat up or down. I have definitely been guilty of doing fusible on the hottest setting and then like, oh man, and bringing it back. We want to avoid that if possible. Get your ruler. The 2.5 by 12.5 has been like my go-to ruler lately. I love it. It's got a nice long run. It's not taking a lot of space on my table. And you're going to just cut from corner to corner and we'll press to the outside. You'll do that for both pieces. That will ultimately make the 4 blocks. Such a cool technique. Love it. I love when I can make a block where I get to oversize it and square up. And that's what this does. More of that coming soon to see how to square this up. It's a really cool feature. Remember how we had 4 of these squares that we drew those lines on? This will be placed in this corner and pin well. Be right in that corner. And you're going right up through this valley. And you're doing the same on your other piece, right in that corner. I can't emphasize enough the importance of really accurate cutting. And it really all starts with right away pressing your fabric out really well and a super sharp blade in the rotary cutter. That is going to automatically start setting you up for a very successful and accurate quilt block. So if you haven't picked up some replacement blades, do them now before you need them. I know what that's like to be literally about 11 o'clock at night and I'm like, oh, I just nicked a blade or I want to keep going. I'm kind of got that quilting bug and I don't have that handy. So just get that so that when you do get a dull blade, you just boom, change it out and you're on your way. And I love, while I'm on the topic, the quick release feature of these makes changing a blade easy peasy. So, the old days, some of the other ones, the originals, had a screw and there was kind of a spring. You had to make sure you understood how it came apart. Very easy, quick release, and much safer. Now that this is in the corner, again, just go sew on the lines. Let me go do that. When I come back, I want to show you now what the next steps are because that's the cool part coming up. So let me just go sew on those lines. You've seen me do that before. And when I come back, I'll show you how to use the other function of this ruler. Okay, so just like we did before, I did a little bit of chain piecing there just to keep moving. We'll use our straight edge, a ruler, whatever you want to do, to cut corner to corner. This is how and why we're able to make 4 blocks with minimal waste. Because remember, when we used to do this the old-fashioned way, you would have to cut 4 rectangles and you would be cutting 8 of those squares. That's 12 pieces. We're cutting 5 pieces of fabric, producing a more accurate block with less waste. I love that. I love that. All right, press to the outside. You'll do that with, of course, all 4 of those units. I'll just do the one so I can show you what the next steps are. Remember when we first looked at our ruler, and I mentioned to you, and I'll turn my piece of paper over here so you can see it. I mentioned that we were letter F, and that really hasn't come into play. Now it comes into play. We have created an oversized flying geese unit that we now have the chance to square up. This is a fairly new notion right here for Creative Grid that works beautifully. It is my absolute favorite spinning mat because of the grip. Some spinning mats, you kind of move them, you start cutting and they kind of slide away from you, making a miscut. This has a grip to it that makes it almost impossible for me to move across my table. So as I'm moving, it's stable, and that's exactly what I want. Remember how we said we're letter F? The trim functions are what's using that lettering system. So A, B, C, D, E, F. This is us. Notice that says trim 1. Let's turn our ruler around. It's actually not a ruler, it's a tool. I'm just so used to using rulers. I always call them rulers, but this one's a tool. Trim 2 has a function as well. Also A, B, C, D, E, and F. We're letter F. We'll stay with letter F for this project. So let's now bring our block out. We're going to start with our trim 1 function. There's the letter F. You can see that from the overhead. I'm going to fit that beautiful V right in the V of my quilt block, just nestling that right in there. And you can see that this exposes the right side and the top. That's half of that. That's why there's 2 trim functions. Trim 1 trims the right side and the top of this block. And then once we cut that and rotate the block, we'll have access to the other sides that need to be trimmed as well. You always want to square up a block on all 4 sides. Don't ever think about trimming up a block on just 2 sides. It's not square, right? You want to trim on every side every time you can square up a block. So we trim here and we'll rotate the mat. So we're always doing a very natural cut, never cutting back toward ourselves. If you find yourself doing this, get a spinning mat, please. You will nick your forearm. I have scars on my arms from doing it. True confession. So I finally have learned that my own health, my own safety is well worth the cost of a spinning mat. So I'm going to slide trim 2 down into the slot. Remember, we're letter F right there. Right, I'm just going to scoot that block up so you can see it a little bit better. That's a brand new rotary cutter. It's a little bit stiff. When I pushed it closed, it was still, I could see it was open just a touch. Make sure, guys, that you're closing those blades every single time, just for your own safety. And obviously, if you've got kids in the room or whatever you've got. Right here, I have my saddle, but look at my lines. Remember, these are the 2 sides we already squared up. They're perfectly 9 degrees. It's a great alignment aid to confirm you're in the right location. We make a cut 1. We make a cut 2. Now let's look at our block. It's absolutely perfect. I could not achieve that near perfection with the same consistent results every time. I get a few good ones in there the old-fashioned way, but there's a lot of misses. And so I love, love, love this technique. You will do the same thing with your other blocks, exact same technique. For the center of our patchwork block, that's cut to 6.5. You could certainly use any ruler you have to get that accomplished. I love mission-specific tools that I know I'm going to use again. This is a great example. I have used that exact flying geese ruler 50 times if I've used it once. You will use it again and again and again. You're never going to get old. Similarly, the Creative Grid 6.5-inch tool, a lot of times I do blocks that are 6.5. So not only is it a great true ruler, but when I just want to be able to put this down and cut around, and I know it's exactly 6.5, why not grab for that? So I will do that here. Make my cut. I'm not having to lift my fabric. I just turn around that, and in moments, I have that perfectly cut and set aside. Now, think about this. Look at this precision. This is because of technology. Let's look at that. When you have a perfectly cut block and a perfectly cut flying geese unit, how can you miss, right? You have already set yourself up for success. And I love that. I cut these out with a 3.5 inch. I just kind of stacked up my fabric and actually cut them at the same time. So if you are wanting to really build some value in your sewing room, build out your rulers. You don't need, I said, the white, gray, black. You don't need a piece with all the other colors that are out there. If you're going to have some extra money to spend, buy more rulers. They will serve you time and time again. I've never once been disappointed for a ruler when I grabbed for it. I've only been disappointed when I didn't have it when I wanted it. I'm like, why didn't I buy that ruler? So I just wanted to emphasize that. Definitely invest in that. If you're in love with quilting, just get some rulers. So that is how we build out I just cut the center. We have our 4 corners. Of course, we have this. Let me just show you some tips and techniques. When you get ready to sew these together, something really cool happens with the way that this was sewn together and the fact that we pressed to the outside. In the old days, I would have probably opted to sew from this side. The reason today that I sew from this side, and I want to encourage you to too, is I can keep an eye on those and I can hit that point right there. So I'm going to pin this in the corner. We'll just sew a little bit of this block. Obviously, if you're doing this project, you're probably not a beginner quilter. You probably know what you're doing with patchwork. But these are just some pointers I want to pass along. Now, we're going to take that to the sewing machine. My needle should pass right there. That is a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Let's head over to the machine here. This is my diagonal seam tape. I use it when I'm doing piecing just to help me start lining up. This is where the needle should be centered. This is the 1/4 inch seam allowance. I have yet another aid that I kind of keep stuck to the side of my machine. You might have seen this. And I have learned that when I put my seam guide just on the right side of that black line of my diagonal seam tape, this helps me stay true to my 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to move that over just a touch. There's an actual ridge here. This comes as a pack of 6. You can also buy the seam guide setter if you sew with a scant quarter. I am not going to sew with a scant quarter. I don't need to today. So I am at a full 1/4 inch seam allowance. So let's press this to the outside. Actually, we're going to press to the inside, aren't we? We definitely don't want to press to the outside. We always want to press where there's the least resistance. So let's see how we've done. Beautiful. So pretty. Love the precision of that. For the rest of the flying geese, of course, this will be here. This will be here. This will be here. Look at that beautiful gold in that stuff. It's so pretty. as you see in these the quilt blocks, we have the green kind of toward the center. So you want to make sure you've got those where they should be in opposite corners. And then here and here. So we'll get everything laid out, make sure it looks right. So I would sew the other one on, again, the same way, pin, pin, sew. And now we know our seam allowance is pressed toward the middle. We love interlocking seams. When on the top and bottom row, when we place right side together, let's take a look at that. In this instance, I'm glad we're actually talking about this. Right now, if I sew from this side, that will trap that seam because I'm traveling in this direction. If I sew from this side, the presser foot is likely to want to roll that, and I have to kind of keep track of it. I could use something called a purple thing. For that reason, I would sew this unit together from this side so I don't have to worry about that. I would pin, pin, and sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance for that reason. Hopefully that makes sense. In this instance, because this is a bulk here and there's not bulk, you're pressing to the outside, and same here, pressing to the outside. What that will do for us when we sew the top to the middle and the bottom to the middle is it'll give you interlocking seams. Actually, I'm going to do this. I want you to absolutely see this. Totally want you to see. I wasn't planning to do this because it's been a long video already. Let me do this. I'm going to sew this on. I'm going to sew these two on. I'm going to come back and I want to show you those interlocking seams. It's so important for you to be able to achieve these points. So I don't want to leave that out. I want to guarantee your success by showing you each one of these things. So let me sew this on, 1/4 inch seam allowance, 1/4 inch seam allowance, 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I will be pressing this toward the middle, this to the outside, and then we will talk about interlocking seams and what does that mean and how to pin them to assure your success. Let me get this stitched and pressed, and I'll be right back with you to show you that step. So I did sew those together. Let me show you the pressing. So the middle of you're always going to press toward kind of where there's no pressure. That's the goal. And then to the outside. Now, when you place these right sides together, I definitely, again, want my flying geese unit to be on top so I have a bullseye of what I'm aiming for. But this is my most important thing right now is this location. From above, you can see that this seam is moving this direction and this seam is moving this direction. Interlocking seams. There's almost a little lock right there. I can feel them. They fit together perfectly, and I'm going to put a pin right along here. This is the next place I will feel this lock right there. I felt it kind of click in. You'll always know when they're on top of each other or just askew. You don't want this sitting on top of this. It's in that notch right there. I can feel it. And we'll put a pin in there. Let's smooth everything out. Make sure our fabrics are stacked top to bottom. Put a pin in here. And in the end, the final pinning is actually in the corners. When I was a young quilter, I just pinned left to right. I didn't really realize the tenderness of these points, and they were always off just a little bit. And I was not sure why that happened. It was because I wasn't pinning right. I wasn't realizing where my priorities needed to be to pin, make sure I'm pinning my points, get everything smoothed out, pin and pin. Let's go sew that 1/4 inch seam allowance. I want you to see that the care we're taking produces some really beautiful results every time. Let's just take a look and see what we have. Beautiful. Our points, points, points. Now, pressing. Sometimes when I have that situation where there's bulk on both sides, you can make the decision to press one direction or the other, or press open to evenly distribute that bulk. I have a little bit of a rolled seam. I don't think it's too big right there. That happens sometimes on the bottom side. In this instance, I can press it out. If it was really rolled over, I'd do just a little bit of a seam rip and go stitch that, just so the block is laying a little bit flatter. I don't always seam rip every one of those that I get. Just depends on kind of the severity of that. And then here we would just kind of press open or up or down as you prefer, right? As you want your block to lay. The point, though, is the points. That's the point, right? That our pinning and our precision of using these tools to help us to oversize these blocks and square up is an absolutely wonderful formula, and it's your roadmap really to success. Repeat that on the other side, and you'll have your block. Repeat those 4. Now everything is going together. Of course, you're batting your backing. If you didn't already grab your backing, it is the poinsettia plaza. We had a special printing done just for us of that beautiful poinsettia. So be sure to pick that up. And then, of course, get your quilt quilted and bound. So I know this has been a longer video. We always love to show you. I don't want there to be any mysteries, right? I'm not hiding anything. I want you to see what we do, how we do it, the tools we do this with. And hopefully you've learned something today. Maybe share that with your quilt guild or friends. Maybe even take some of these tips and techniques into other projects. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already done that. Open those emails when they come in. Some of these block of the months sell out within days. So you never want to miss out on the things that are happening here at Shabby Fabrics. Thank you for giving me a good part of your day, and I'll see you soon on another Shabby Fabrics video.